Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex and this is my channel Frank Fiction, where I talk about books and the book publishing industry. As the name implies, today's video is going to be a little bit different because it's going to be a bit of a mess. So my one goal with my first real year into BookTube was that I was going to try to make at least one video a month, where at the bare minimum I was going to do a wrap up for the books that I read in the previous month. And I was doing really well up until last month, when I kind of dropped off the face of the earth. And there were some really good reasons for that, but the main one being that I tragically and unexpectedly lost my dog Ash to a rare and aggressive form of cancer. And when something like that happens, I'm sure you can understand, I didn't have the desire to be creative or to try to make videos that I thought were fun or informative or talk about the books that I read, because I was grieving really horribly, and I'm still grieving, but I, in this video, am doing my part to try to get back into the swing of things, to continue on with my hobbies. This video might not be as upbeat, it might not be as fun or lively or just that great, honestly, but I hope that you will understand and that you will be forgiving of that fact. So I appreciate you spending this time with me regardless. And with that, I have two books that I'm going to share with you. Let's get into it. The first book that I have for you is The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. This is the story of Vincent, who is a young woman who meets a wealthy businessman named Jonathan Alkaitis while she works as a bartender at his hotel. They end up entering into a fake marriage agreement where he gets to be seen publicly with her as his wife in order to help his business adventures, and she gets the benefit of having a plush lifestyle. But things end up going south when she realizes that he is actually running a Ponzi scheme and his entire financial empire falls. With the exception of some supernatural elements that happen at the beginning and the end of the book, I would definitely say that this could be described as a mystery psychological fiction. Initially, when I was reading it, I could have swore that it would be considered contemporary, but that wasn't quite right. I would say I don't normally gravitate towards this kind of book, but I'm a fan of Emily St. John Mandel's because I read Station 11 and I read The Sea of Tranquility. We're gonna get back to that. I picked up this story, and despite the fact that I don't really like the slow unraveling of people's lives, you know, over the course of a period of time, I usually like books with a lot of adventure or things kind of with flair going on. I would say that I genuinely like the way that the story was written. The novel had a different tone than either Station 11 or The Sea of Tranquility, and the fact that all three of the books were related and simultaneously also fit into different genres is quite enamoring to me. I don't know that most authors would be able to accomplish that with such success, but Mandel handles this series, if you want to call it that. It's not really a series, but they are all taking place in the same universe and they have overlapping characters. So kind of a series. Anyway, I think that the way that she handled these books is very unique, to say the least. If you were to read the novels in the order that I did, which was the first novel, Station 11, the third novel, The Sea of Tranquility, and then The Glass Hotel, you wouldn't think after reading the first and the third novel that the stories really had much in common, if anything at all. But then I read The Glass Hotel and I realized that all of it was interconnected. And so I would really like to get into some theories with you. Warning, there are going to be major spoilers. Because the stories are interconnected, if you hear about one having not read it, it might mess something else up for a different book, so just keep that in mind. I should also mention that the reason that I read the books out of order, again, it's not a series. There's not a book 1, book 2, and book 3. You can read them in any order you want, but I didn't read them in the order of the dates in which they were published, and I think that that had a significant impact on my reading experience. I want to get into some of the juicy bits that tie the books together. I got my whiteboard. I am literally sitting on the floor with my whiteboard so that I can explain this stuff to you. I have absolutely no idea whether you can see this. I'm looking in the viewfinder. I feel like the column for The Glass Hotel might be a little blurry. I told you this video is a mess, so we're just gonna go with it. in the story Station 11, there is a character, she's one of the main characters of the story, named Miranda. She is important because she writes the story within a story, a graphic novel series that is called Station 11. It's where the book gets its name. And she has a boss named Leon Prevent, who is her manager at a shipping company. And eventually Miranda becomes one of the big wigs at the shipping company. In the story of Station 11, there is a pandemic that breaks out that is called the Georgia flu, and Miranda is killed by the Georgia flu. And it is known that the Georgia flu wipes out 99% of the world's population. So it was extremely deadly, devastating. Society completely collapsed. So in the Glass Hotel, Miranda and Leon show up. They are characters in this story, although significantly less important. It is implied during the time period of this story that this is happening pretty much right before the Georgia flu breaks out. So it's shortly before that time where the end of this book is. And then we have some other characters named Paul and Vincent. So Vincent is the main character of this story. So the Miranda of this story, that's Vincent. Now, Vincent disappears. So Vincent disappears. How do you spell disappears? Oh, sweet God. I am literally the world's worst speller. Disappears. I feel like that's supposed to be two P's. I don't know. It doesn't matter. She disappears. That is where the mystery of this story comes in, outside of kind of like the political intrigue stuff. Shut up, phone. Okay, so we get to the Sea of Tranquility. In the Sea of Tranquility, Paul and Vincent are present. Vincent is mentioned. Paul is discussed a little bit more than he was in this story, but it is confirmed in the Sea of Tranquility, okay, that Vincent disappeared. Not Vincent. Vincent disappeared. Okay? But also in this story, there is an author in the far, far future named Olive. And Olive wrote a story called Marienbad, and she is somebody who studied pandemics. And in the story of the Sea of Tranquility, she talks about the Georgia flu. But she says, oh, I imagine how the world could have been if the Georgia flu had actually broken out and hadn't been contained. So in the story of the Sea of Tranquility, the Georgia flu was contained. So I want you to look at this, okay, and I want you to tell me how all of these things are simultaneously true. When you have characters that overlap, there are things that very clearly are mentioned between, Miranda's in shipping here, Miranda's in shipping here, Paul and Vincent are here, Vincent disappears in the Sea of Tranquility. They're all connected. And yet somehow, Station 11, Georgia flu, catastrophic, Sea of Tranquility, Georgia flu is contained. I had to spend a lot of time thinking about this because I wanted to try to figure out, because this isn't technically a series, again, why? Why is it not technically a series? And I think I've figured it out. So I have two main theories. The first one I'm going to tell you is the one that I think is the most likely, and then the second one is me just completely spitballing. In the Sea of Tranquility, a huge part of this story that is kind of delved into later on is with regards to the Time Institute. And the Time Institute, there is a woman there who is trying to prove whether or not we live in a simulation. Because the Time Institute talks about how if you are traveling back in the past and you do anything to alter the past, history will kind of rewrite itself to correct in such a way that it seems almost like you didn't alter it at all. Okay, but there are still some events that change from one timeline to the next. So here is my theory. It's discussed in that book that it seems like there's a high probability that we are in fact living in a simulation. If you read the books the way that I did, where you read the first book and the third book before you read the second book, it seems like they're not really all that related, as I mentioned earlier. The Glass Hotel is the one piece that binds those other two stories together into a larger narrative. So my theory is that the Glass Hotel is the one true piece of history. Okay, this is the thing that actually happened, period. Okay, because this is set before the Georgia flu in both books. I think that there's something going on with the Time Institute changing history, because they change and alter history for anything that would prevent the Time Institute from existing. All of civilization is wiped out. Obviously, the Time Institute can't exist because technology doesn't work. So they don't want that reality to be the case. They want the reality of the Sea of Tranquility. I think the Glass Hotel is the one connecting thing, and the Sea of Tranquility and Station 11 are both alternate timelines. I think that's the only thing that would make sense. Is this is the universe where the Time Institute doesn't exist. This is the universe where the Time Institute does, but all of the people exist in both regardless. And if that makes absolutely no sense, I'm sorry, go and read the books, because they're actually really good and I enjoy them a lot. My second theory, and what I think is far less likely, and I talked about this in my book review for The Sea of Tranquility, is I mentioned that Olive is an author of that book called Marienbad. Well, Marienbad is the story of civilization being wiped out by a pandemic, and in it there is a prophet that's basically the big bad of the story, and the prophet dies in a way that seems very anticlimactic. And it was also in Station 11, and she talks about how she received a lot of criticism for Marienbad about the fact that people were like, well, why didn't you make it a bigger deal? And I said, I really believe that Emily St. John Mandel experienced those things after she wrote Station 11. As she went on her book tour, she received the same criticism, and therefore Olive is a self-insert character of Emily St. John Mandel. If that is the case, I think that there's a possibility that Station 11 in this universe is Olive's book, right? But with a different name. So this is a fictional story. Shut up, phone. This is a fictional story. The Glass Hotel is still is true history. This happened, and then the Sea of Tranquility also happened. And Olive, when she was writing her story, ended up using the names of real people. Because authors do that. When they write books about history, they use the names of real people and they just insert them in fictional scenarios. I do think that that's less likely, because I don't really think that that theory holds water as much as the idea of alternate timelines. Did this make any sense at all? Okay, so all of that being said, and all of the intrigue, if that's the right word, that I have for what the heck is going on in this series, I will say that the characters in the Glass Hotel were not particularly likable. I think Mandel does a great job of writing realistic people in a way that does not make them look like heroes, because her protagonists are not necessarily good people or kind people or generous people. They're just people. And I think there's something to be said for that. And perhaps it even makes them more interesting. I would definitely say that The Glass Hotel is a solid read, but I don't know that I'm necessarily ever going to read it again. So I'm going to give it an overall rating of 3.5 stars. Up next, I have The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez, who is also the author of a book that I previously read that was one of my favorites called The Vanished Birds. You can see I have been reading from authors who I have been intrigued by, or I've really liked here recently, and I think that that's been a lot of fun for me, because I typically take such huge breaks between reading one book by an author and another book by the same author, so it's been fun to have them be so close together. This is the story of a vengeful goddess who is determined to end the centuries-long reign of the Moon Throne. In order to accomplish that, she is going to have to murder her own children, who are known as the Triplet Terrors. Each one, because she is a goddess, was bestowed a unique and terrible gift and powers that they use to subjugate the people of their empire. The goddess is so old, though, that she is incredibly frail, and she doesn't have the same level of strength that she had in her youth. So in order to accomplish this major task, she has to enlist the help of two young men in order to free their kingdom. This is the first book that I've ever read that was written in second person, which made it quite difficult to get into. The you that is described in the story is a young man from a war-torn country that has a completely different culture and background from myself. So the you described in the story isn't even a generic you, it is a very specific you, which meant that I had a hard time relating to the character in the background that the author was trying to give me. Keaton suggested that perhaps Jimenez was trying to be almost like a dungeon master for D&D, where he's setting the scene for the reader. So he's telling you this character that you're kind of supposed to embody, and you're just supposed to take it and go along on this journey. As a non-D&D player, I found that quite difficult to wrap my mind around initially, but I do think after he kind of gave some context, I think that makes a lot of sense. The other part that was really difficult to get into was on each page, there are italicized sentences or words that represent the thoughts and feelings of the people of the land, either currently or at some point in the past. These individuals were often never named or introduced in any way, so it can be quite jarring when you're going along and you're reading the story, and then all of a sudden there's this break in the text for the random thoughts of these people that you're like, okay, I have to try to contextualize what it is that they're saying. So eventually, as you continue to read the book, those breaks make a lot more sense. But in the beginning, I was looking at this like, okay, who is this person? Where are they? How are they important? It was very confusing. If there was a way to kind of hold off on that until like a little bit further in the story when things would begin to be explained, that might have been better. In a way, The Spear Cuts Through Water is the exact opposite of The Vanished Birds, which took place over countless years and was only punctuated by really important moments. The Spear Cuts Through Water, on the other hand, was told over the course of 5 days. So every minute, itty-bitty little detail that could possibly be told was mentioned in the story. And it was not a small book either. It was actually larger than The Vanished Birds. It was a rather thick story. And while I like this story, I would definitely say that The Vanished Birds had more of an emotional impact on me and therefore was more heavily favored. I also tend to enjoy sci-fi more than pretty much any other genre, including fantasy, so that probably adds a little weight as well, but I can tell you that his kind of twisted and horrific writing style is present in both stories, so he definitely has a consistent voice, if you will, between both novels. And what I mean by twisted is he doesn't hold back on certain elements where like other books might make it seem kind of fun or upbeat and, you know, oh, it's just another sci-fi or fantasy romp. He will put details in the story that are genuinely horrifying. So in The Spear Cuts Through Water, there's one of the terrors that actually is eating a god alive, like just piece by piece, while it's living in torment, knowing it's being eaten. He's eating it alive. It's those kinds of details that you can expect from Jimenez's writing. And the weird part is he's poetic in how he describes even gruesome or evil acts. Like he talks about them in such a way that it almost doesn't seem like they're horrible, and that's what makes it so much worse. He can give his villains this sense of almost being redeemable even though you know that they're horrible people. I don't think most authors would be able to accomplish that. I know I've said that twice now. I talked about that with Mandel, where it's like, I don't think most authors could write 3 books that all take place in the same universe that are completely different genre and tone. Well, Jimenez also is that author that I don't think most people would be able to take a villainous character and give them any level of redeeming quality or sympathy when they are so clearly gruesome and horrible. I don't know whether you would like that or not. I think it's actually quite compelling, but that might not be for everybody. I really enjoy his writing style, and that's why I love The Vanished Birds so much, and I think even despite its quirks and eccentricities, The Spear Cuts Through Water is still a book that I would recommend to people, but of course there would be some caveats. If you are somebody that tends to spend a lot of time skimming details in books to kind of just get the general plot, I definitely don't think that this story would be for you because there are a lot of callbacks. So again, minor details are extremely important. It's loaded with them. So if you don't pay attention to those, something might get mentioned later on in the book that you're like, I don't remember why that was significant. Jimenez is also one of those writers where not everybody gets a happy ending, not everybody makes it out alive at the end, and I think that can make stories seem much more real. I like stories with stakes. I would say Jimenez is an author that makes you feel like there are actual stakes and you don't really know what's gonna happen or who it's gonna happen to. So I appreciate that. It's not cheesy, it's never corny, and it's not telegraphed. So I like that. I personally feel like we don't get enough stories where the protagonists just don't get an easy win in the end. Overall, I would give this a solid rating of 4 stars. I can tell you that when I do my wrap up in July, I'm gonna have at least twice as many books as this to talk about for just 1 month because I'm really doing my best to dive back into reading. I'm also reading things right now that I have never branched into before, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you about that later on. I'm also trying to think of what videos I want to make outside of wrap-ups, and I have recently come up with an idea, but of course I have to have the mental energy and the presence to be able to be in front of a camera and the time. So fingers crossed that I'm going to be able to do that because I do enjoy making content, and it's really fun to learn video editing skills. Every single time I edit a video, I've learned something different. Really looking forward to just trying to get back into the swing of things. So thank you so much for spending this time with me as always, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.